Surface Water Management Plan after our first event in May of this year. As the presentation states, I'd be grateful if everybody could keep their microphone on mute until the Q&A session, where there will be the facility to ask any questions. And as I've just stated, this event will be recorded. So to move on, what is Bowness Surface Management Plan? So I'll run through that tonight. So I'll do a background on introductions, and then I'll look at the background. ACOM, our Falkirk Council Term Commission, will then give their presentation on Bowness Surface Water Management Plan, and we'll have a short Q&A session if there is any. So, as I've said, my name is Gary McGregor. I'm currently Acting Engineer and Design Manager at Falkirk Council. With me this evening, we have various members of the Falkirk Council flooding team, including Aaron Moyson, who's Acting Roads, Bridges and Flooding Coordinator. We've got Holly Easton, who's our officer, Rusty Passia, who's our graduate, and Lewis Watson, who is our trainee. Obviously, in addition to ourselves, we have ACOM, who are our term commission, and they will be until next month, at least. So a bit of background on Bowness and the Strategic Surface Water Management Plan. So ACOM developed a Strategic Surface Water Management Plan under Falkirk Council's obligations from the Flood Risk Management Scotland Act 2009. This Strategic Surface Water Management Plan fulfilled our actions from the SEPA National Flood Risk Management Strategies Surface Water Management Plan. Bowness, as most of you will be aware, is a coastal town located approximately 7 kilometres east of Falkirk. 7 miles east of Falkirk, sorry. The town is protected from coastal flooding by the Bowness Flood Protection Scheme with direct defences. It is, however, impacted by surface water flooding, with problems predominantly coming from runoff of agricultural land, as well as surcharge and drainage systems. So the purpose of this evening event is to inform the members of the public, local members and any other relevant stakeholders on the current phase of the Surface Water Management Plan in Bowness. This will help to identify long-term sustainable and achievable mitigation measures which can be implemented to manage surface water risk in Bowness. So I'll now hand you over to Hannah and the team from ACOM, who will provide introductions to the team, the project team, and then present on their work to date for the flood study.
Great, thanks Gary. I'll just share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see that? Yep. Great. Okay, we'll get started. So thanks, Gary, for the introduction. Just to introduce the project team. So my name is Hannah, and I've been project manager on the project. And with me today is Ben, one of our engineers on the project. Unfortunately, Aisling, our technical lead, couldn't be here today, but she's also been heavily involved in the project. So a little bit of study background. Gary's kind of shared a little bit of this already, but just to remind everybody why we're here, as part of the SEPA National Flood Risk Assessment, which investigated all sources of flooding, as well as the likely impacts of climate change. They identified that Bowness was at risk of surface water flooding, and then further investigation was required. And Falkirk Council commissioned ACOM to undertake a surface water management plan here in Bowness. So the purpose of today is just to bring you up to date with the work that we've done so far and since the last consultation event, and to show you the preferred options that we've considered to mitigate flood risk. So a little overview of the process that we've been through. Initial stages included data gathering, and then developing an understanding of the catchments, some flood hydraulic modelling and mapping, and then some baseline assessments and option development and appraisal. And then we held our first public information event back in May, and since then we've been doing our final reporting and recommendations for future management of flood risk. So surface water flooding is flooding that's as a result of rainfall runoff, flowing or ponding water over the ground. Can also be from sewers and other artificial drainage systems where the network capacity is exceeded, or could be flooding from very small urban watercourses such as small culverted watercourses. Throughout the presentation, we'll be referring to return periods. And this is used to describe the likelihood of a flood in a certain how likely a flood of a certain size is to occur in any given year. And we'll also be speaking about standard of protection, and this is the degree of protection that a flood defence provides. So just to recap on what was shared in the last consultation event, this was the 1 in 30 year flood map. So you can see that there's significant areas of flooding in some critical areas of Bo'ness. Some of these areas include, but are not limited to, Blair Avenue, Drumacre, Carradine, Corby Hall, Linlithgow Road and Dawson Place. You'll also notice that there's some flooding predicted at the Drum. However, this is a bit of an overestimation as the drainage design that's currently being implemented at the phase development there is not currently included in the hydraulic model. And once the development's complete, it's recommended that the modelling is updated to better reflect that area. And then we're just going to show you the 1 in 200 year. So this is a more extreme event. You'll see a lot of the critical areas are the same, but there's some increased flood extents. As with the 1 in 30 year, flooding's largely caused by sort of surface water and surface network capacity exceedance. However, at the Kinneil Railway and Drumacre, there is some flooding that's as a result of small watercourse flooding. So at the end of the last consultation, we took you through some of the considered long list options that we were looking at. And this is just a reminder of some of them here. So they include things like flood walls, embankments, pipe upsizing, culvert, watercourse daylighting, property level protection, swales, detention basins and storage areas, bioretention, and agricultural management. So I'll now pass you over to Ben.
Yeah, hi there. So as Hannah was just talking about the end of the last event, I thought I'd kind of fill you guys in on what was said at the last event and what actions we've taken on that. So one of the main issues raised at the last event was that the public had concerns on road gullies and seeing an issue where they were flooding quite regularly across Bo'ness, but specifically at Carradine. So we did a little bit of investigation in our model here, and we actually found that the Scottish Water sewer in this location was reaching capacity at very low return periods. And when that's the case, it's kind of up to Scottish Water to try and solve that issue. So out of that, we've made a couple of recommendations that Falkirk Council engage in consultation with Scottish Water to try and resolve this issue, and also have engagement with the roads team on gully clearance in general in and around Bo'ness. And then the other main outcome was to do with culvert blockage throughout Bo'ness. So again, we checked the data we had for existing CCTV surveys and culverts, and we couldn't see any of the blockages here, although some of these CCTV surveys were some age. So again, we've recommended that Falkirk Council further investigate these issues. And then from there, we've undertaken our appraisal of the shortlisted options following the Scottish Government guidance, which is laid out on the right-hand side there. So from our long list, we then screened that to get a short list of measures, and then we've undertaken a high level appraisal, and then at the end of that appraisal, we've prioritised our preferred solutions. So if you go to the next slide, please, Hannah. Yes, so this slide just gives an overview of the locations of the shortlisted options. I won't go into them in too much detail right now because the following slides kind of cover each option individually. This was just to give you guys an idea of where we're looking at options overall in Bo'ness and how this ties in with the flood maps we showed earlier and kind of looking at those main critical areas. Next slide, please. So just as a kind of intermediate step between that long list and short list, we did a kind of high level modelling exercise whereby we ruled out options that basically weren't viable, weren't going to be economically viable or reduce flood risk enough to take forward into the detailed appraisal and shortlist. So I'm just going to run through those really quickly. So the first one was swales at the adjacent to properties at the A904, and then the next was a swale at Douglas Drive to intercept overland flows in this location. The next one was to utilise the green space adjacent to Grahamsdyke Road to store some overland flows and protect properties in and around Drumacre. And finally, there was a stormwater separation consideration in the town centre. So moving on to the shortlist, I will say at the start that there's dimensions on all of these slides, and should note that these are indicative based on the concept design at this stage. But the first option was looking at constructing an embankment behind Birdland Avenue. This aimed at protecting the properties to the north from overland flows. And you can see the length of the embankment there and the varying height. We did come across a couple of issues when we were doing the design for this. So there's potential construction within the Antheim Wall site. At some locations, the max height of the bund was quite significant, and this could cause a social barrier to the parkland to the south. And then, as we've kind of already touched on, there's that residual flooding issue from Cardan Bray and the Scottish Water network in this location. And next slide, please. The next option we looked at was kind of trying to formalise that green space at Corby Hall to utilise as storage. And to do this, we would propose to regrade some of the roads to encourage flows into this storage area, and then divert this back to the combined drainage network to the east. When we were kind of running through this option, however, we did see that there was limited benefit to the properties in this area. However, most of the benefit we saw was with reduction in flood depth in the carriageway, and the example given there is a reduction of around 0.5 metre for the 1 in 10 year event. Next slide, please. So this option looks at formalising a storage area in the wasteland at Crawfield Lane, and also upsizing a pipe on Douglas Drive to try and alleviate the build-up of surface water on Dawson Place. So when we did our baseline modelling, we found that a lot of the runoff from the south was naturally pooling in this wasteland area. So again, we decided it might be worthwhile to see if formalising this storage area had any good impacts. And again, we would look at discharging this back into the culverted watercourse. I think it's eventually discharged into the Dean Burn. What we did find here, however, was, as you can see from the option, it's kind of just the buildings to the south that would be protected, and there's still quite a significant number of properties to the west, the buildings to the north that would be protected, and there's still significant properties to the west, the south and the east of that storage area, which are, for this option, aren't protected. And given the cost it would take to construct something of that size, it probably wasn't going to be financially viable. Next slide, please. However, we did have another option in this area. We looked at constructing swales adjacent to Crawfield Road and St John's Way, and these look at intercepting that overland flow from the agricultural land to the south and putting it back into that culverted watercourse. We also looked at upsizing the upstream end of that culvert, just because it's undersized at the moment and we're putting additional flow in here. This option kind of looks at providing protection to similar areas to that previous option. However, you can see now that the kind of industrial estate and the in and around St John's Way now are being protected by these options. And also there's added environmental benefits such as biodiversity and water treatment that you can get through implementing swales. Next slide, please. Another option we'd looked at was daylighting a small portion of culvert behind Bowness Academy in that green space. So the idea here was to provide more volume to that watercourse and also allow a larger stretch of the watercourse to accept overland flow, essentially. Again, you have those additional environmental benefits that's similar to swales, and also potential to create a community hub for nature. However, we did find that there was limited flood risk impact downstream, largely because a lot of these properties to the east there are only affected at the higher return periods. Next slide, please. A similar option again, we'd looked at implementing swales in Douglas Dog Park to intercept overland flows from the south, and also to try and encourage some of the flow on the nearby roads into those swales by some regrading, and then these would be the outfall into the Dean Burn. However, similar to the Corby Hall example, what we found here was that most of the benefit was to do with flood reduction on the carriageway, and actually there wasn't that much benefit to the individual properties in these locations. Next slide, please. So our final kind of engineered option that we looked at was, again, another swale adjacent to Glenview to intercept those overland flows from the south and put these back to the combined sewer, and also looked at increasing the curb height along Crawfield Road, essentially to stop any flow from the road overtopping the curb and getting into these properties. Again, there's those added environmental benefits from swales, and whilst this option appears to have quite a low standard of protection, there's quite high additional benefit above that standard protection, and a number of the properties in these locations benefit from much higher standard protections than is stated there. Next slide, please. And our final option was property level protection. So we targeted PLP at 73 residential properties throughout Bo'ness, and we based this on the at-risk properties in hotspots that had no other viable engineered options. Now this number can be scaled up or down depending on the uptake of properties wanting to implement PLP, or where engineered solutions can't be achieved in the other hotspots, the number could rise. I should point out that property level protection does not prevent flooding from happening. It just reduces the risk of flood entering properties, and we've got some examples along the bottom there of what these could look like. The standard protection for these ranges between 1 and 2 year to 1 in 1,000 year, and that's essentially based on what level of flood risk the property is experiencing. Because property level protection provides protection up to 0.6 meters, and because this is a surface water management, because this is to do with surface water, there's few locations where the depths are getting above that, so most properties can be protected by PLP. Next slide, please, Hannah. So after we'd assessed the feasibility of the options, we then began our appraisal process. So this included an economic appraisal, where we looked at the cost of an option and then compared that to the money saved in terms of the property damages, cleanup costs, emergency service callouts, and then we weight those against each other to determine if an option makes financial sense to construct. We don't only focus on the money though, we also look at social and environmental appraisals to look at things such as social vulnerability, the water quality that an option can provide, and any reduction in pollution, if heritage sites are affected, what climatic factors go into building an option, and what standard of protection they provide. And then the appraisal process considers all these options together and then allows us to present preferred solutions for Bo'ness. So next slide, please, Hannah. So this slide here summarises that option appraisal process, and highlighted in green are our 3 preferred solutions to carry forward. So the swale south of St John's Way and Crawfield Road, the curb raising and swale adjacent to Glenview, and the property level protection we will be recommending are carried forward. They all have a positive benefit cost ratio, and in terms of the swale options, they also have really good social and environmental benefits. I should note, you can see on this slide that option 1.1 at Birdland, the embankment at Birdland Avenue, also has a positive benefit cost ratio. However, there's some negative social environmental impacts that I touched on earlier, such as the construction within the Antonine Wall site, the height of the embankment in some locations, and also that residual flood risk in the kind of northwest of that area that was looking at being protected. So we're recommending that all of these issues are looked at in more detail before further decisions made on that option. Next slide, please. So the next steps really are, we'll give this study to Falkirk Council, who will use it to make decisions on flood risk management in Bo'ness. And then, as I've touched on a number of times, the Falkirk Council will engage with their roads team regarding road gully clearance based on the previous feedback we've had from you guys, and also that consultation with Scottish Water on the capacity of their sewer network at Carradine. If you guys have any feedback, there's an email on the screen there. And yeah, thanks for your time. I'll hand you back to Gary.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Hannah. I'll just swiftly discuss what some of our next steps are, and then we can move into a Q&A. So, as Ben said, we're going to have to look at the conclusions and recommendations from the shortlisted options, and what we will do from that is we are proposing to draft a committee report to our executive committee, who the next one that will be available will be early 2023. And in that report, we will define these recommendations that we are looking for to carry out in Bo'ness, as well as trying to find avenues and streams of funding for these works, as these will be over and above what our standard capital and revenue budgets are. Like Ben said, we'll be looking at quick wins, so we'll be discussing with our roads maintenance team on gully cleaning regimes. We'll engage with Scottish Water to look at their plans for the area and potential proposals for the area. Any other maintenance that we can carry out, so we carry out watercourse inspections on an annual or a quarterly or a yearly basis. So these will be carried out, and we'll analyse the reports and inspections from these, and we'll carry out maintenance if required from those. And we'll also look at obviously any CCTV surveys that are required, like Ben said, in some of the culverts and ongoing hotspots. And now we've really just got an open floor to any questions that anybody may have at this moment in time. Hi, Miranda.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I'm from Resilience
Hi.
Department, and I was just wondering, could I ask, are any of these mitigations anything that we could look at community resilience groups maybe owning, or the funding we could get from that way? Is there anything that we could link in here for community resilience groups?
So possibly, Miranda. However, you know, in terms of funding for it, they're quite substantial, a lot of these the schemes, and then so it really depends on, you know, the devil will be in the detail, I suppose, once we define all these areas, and exactly like Ben was discussing PLP, you know, there's possible streams to get funding for these projects. However, in terms of ownership, it would usually, with regards to maintenance going forward, we would probably like to keep them either in the local authority, or be it a Scottish Water or a Factor, whoever. We would probably tend to try and steer away from community groups just for future maintenance proposals.
Super duper. No, I just had to ask.
No, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions?
Can I maybe come in there, Gary, in response to Miranda's question? Hi, Miranda. I'm Carol Rayburn, Director of the Scottish Flood Forum. I think in terms of, you know, community resilience groups, there's kind of two approaches that could be possible. As you see, one of the four options is about property level protection, but there's always room for a community resilience group to be thinking about the monitoring of weather, forecasting, looking out for neighbours, etc., who might be more vulnerable, particularly for things like door barriers, for example, on properties, because, you know, if you're elderly, maybe you can't necessarily you might not have the strength to install it, so you're looking on your good neighbours to help out and work together in the event that there is a flood incident forecast. So the Scottish Flood Forum, the work that we do, whilst we support communities at risk of flooding, we also work to set up future flood resilience groups. So as things move along, then that's, you know, a potential option that we can help your resilience group as well, just thinking of the kind of bigger picture of resilience within a particular neighbourhood.
Yes, I was looking at the door barriers. You must have read my mind. I just wondered if there was any capacity there that we could help along with things. But thank you, that was very useful.
Not at all. Okay.
Thanks, Carol. Any further questions? No comments? No, all good. So, last but not least, as a concluding statement. So, you know, as a council, as a local authority, we want to help reduce flooding throughout the local authority as much as we can. May include quick wins, or it may include longer term schemes such as surface water management plans and flood studies, which we're currently looking at. But here are some contacts that can assist in the future. We'd like to hear of any issues that you have, any of your addresses or that the residents have. And Carol's obviously mentioned the Scottish Flood Forum there. There's Scottish Water Contact Centre as well as SEPA. Unless there's anything else, we'll conclude at that. And thank you all for attending, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye for now.